I dated a mafia boss for 6 years. We planned 99 weddings. Guess how many times I actually became a bride? 0. Every time his fragile little assistant, Emily, so much as stubbed her toe or got herself kidnapped, he'd bolt faster than a smuggling ship leaving port. So this time I'm done playing. I disappeared, and guess what? He lost his mind. It was our 99th wedding attempt. The venue was a private yacht anchored off the coast of Valemont Harbor. A white carpet stretched across the rear deck, and in the distance, the Statue of Concord stood quietly over the golden sea. This time, there were no invitations. No friends. Just a few close family members who treated the whole thing more like a formality than a celebration. A few days earlier, I had been ambushed during a family meeting by one of Daniel's longtime rivals. I escaped alone, twisting my ankle in the process. It was still swollen, but I pushed through and confirmed the final vow sequence with the bishop. Daniel didn't seem to care. He hadn't visited the bridal suite. Hadn't looked at my foot. He spent the entire pre-ceremony break crouched in the VIP lounge, carefully wrapping a bandage around Emily Jennings' toe. She had scraped it getting onto the yacht. He gently held her foot and blew on the wound like she was some frightened animal. Across the deck, my mother watched with a stormy expression. "He never did that for you," she said quietly. "This isn't a wedding. It's a humiliation." Still, I put on the same dress that had waited with me through 98 failed ceremonies. At sunset, I stood at the yacht's stern, waiting for Daniel to walk me down the rose-lined aisle. Minutes passed. He never came. When I approached the VIP lounge, 2 armed guards blocked my way. "The boss has an urgent matter to handle," one said. "What urgent matter?" I asked. The door opened. Daniel stepped out, supporting Emily. His face was tight with concern. "Her foot's infected," he said. "I need to take her to the ER. Let's put this on hold. Once she's feeling better, I'll be completely there for you. All right?" He didn't even look at me. He just helped her into the helicopter. That year marked our 6th anniversary. It was also the 99th time he had canceled our wedding because of Emily. In the past, I would have broken down. Screamed. Begged. But this time, I just smiled faintly. "Sure. Emily's foot can't wait." He paused, surprised by my calm. "When I come back, I'll bring you fresh lilies," he said. But I had never liked lilies. I once had an asthma attack at a banquet because of lily pollen. He had panicked, carried me to the hospital, and promised he'd never forget. Apparently, even that didn't last 6 years. The helicopter rose into the sky, stirring my veil and lifting rose petals from the deck. I turned to face the guests. "The wedding is cancelled," I announced. Then I raised the scissors in my hand and cut through the dress I had worn 99 times. The white satin fell around me like a silent funeral. I stared at the empty sky where the helicopter had disappeared and whispered, "Daniel, 6 years of waiting ends here, just like this dress." It wasn't until the very end that my mother finally spoke up. "Sweetheart, come back with us to Wexley." She had said it before, but this time it landed differently. Sitting at the edge of the yacht deck, I looked up and met her hopeful eyes. The truth was, my father was the don of Wexley's largest mafia syndicate. I had been raised in its inner circle, groomed to one day inherit the business. But when I went to college, I met Daniel. I left everything behind and followed him to Valemont, a city of greed and betrayal. Daniel came from nothing and hated when anyone mentioned his past. I never told him the truth. To him, I was just a girl from a struggling neighborhood. Over 6 years, I worked my way up through his syndicate, from grunt to a seat at the long table. People called us a deadly duo, ruthless in business, unstoppable in love. I once thought I'd tell him who I really was. But that moment never came. Now, it didn't matter anymore. "I'll go back," I whispered. My mother's eyes lit up. She and my father pulled me into a tight embrace. "Don't worry," she said. "We won't let you suffer again." Back at the apartment I shared with Daniel, everything felt hollow. I made a pot of pasta and opened Instagram. Emily had posted a photo. She wore a tight dress, pressed up against Daniel, smiling like the world belonged to her. Caption: "Tricked the stoic boss into playing golf. Promised him roasted lamb ribs at my place, and he said yes right away." I knew he wasn't coming home, just like always. Thankfully, we had never filed a marriage certificate. The next morning, I packed my things and went to HQ. I handed my resignation to the capo in charge. "You're one of our best," he said. Sharp instincts. Reliable. Don't throw this away. As he spoke, Daniel walked in. He had visible hickeys on his neck. He reeked of that same sweet perfume. I remembered how he used to hate marks, said they ruined his image. Turns out, it wasn't the marks he hated. It was that I left them. The capo turned to him. Perfect timing, boss. Talk to your girlfriend, she's quitting. Did you two argue again? It has nothing to do with him, I said firmly. Daniel's eyes locked on mine. Is this about me canceling the wedding again? The capo sensed the tension and quietly laughed. Daniel stepped forward, his voice sharper now. I told you, Emily hurt her foot. That's all. I'm not angry, I replied. I'm just exhausted. I need a break. Somewhere new. If you're tired, take a vacation, he said. Why leave the syndicate? Now people will think Emily caused it. How is she supposed to keep her position? He didn't care about me, only Emily's image. I didn't respond. I glanced at the hickey again. He noticed and raised his hand to cover it. It's just a mosquito bite, he muttered. I nearly laughed. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders. There we go. No more drama. I'll take you to dinner at Per Se. Let's make up, okay? I said nothing. He mistook my silence for agreement. But I had already decided. I wasn't going to say goodbye. I was leaving Valemont for good. Daniel. Emily burst in without knocking. Oops, she giggled, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just need help with this deal. Daniel immediately turned to her. She leaned in close, whispering, looping her arm through his as they walked out, leaving the door open just long enough for her to flash me a smug smile. The room went quiet. The bracelet on my wrist slipped off, the one Daniel gave me on our first anniversary. Strong as diamonds, he'd said. I stared at it for a long time. Then I dropped it in the trash. Right along with everything I still felt for him. I left the city before sunrise. No note. No message. No dramatic farewell. Just silence. The last thing I did was withdraw the funds from the safe behind the bookshelf. Not Daniel's money, mine. Every dime I had earned over the past 6 years. I had kept it separate for a reason I hadn't understood until now. Maybe I had always known I'd need an escape. By 8 a.m., I was gone. No one saw me leave. No guards questioned me. In Valemont, everyone assumes that if you walk like you belong, you do. I slipped away in a nondescript car with tinted windows and a trunk full of memories I never wanted to unpack again. The drive to Wexley took 5 hours. I didn't turn on the radio. The silence was enough. Along the highway, green hills rolled past like waves, and with every mile between me and Daniel, I felt my lungs expand. For the first time in years, I could breathe. When I arrived at the compound, 2 black-clad guards greeted me at the gate. Welcome home, Miss Alessa. It had been years since anyone had called me that. Inside, the manor was just as I remembered, tall columns, dark mahogany, windows that reflected both sunlight and secrets. My father stood at the top of the stairs, flanked by advisors and lieutenants. His face remained unreadable, but his eyes softened the moment he saw me. About time, he said simply. I climbed the stairs, one slow step at a time. At the top, he held out his hand. I took it, and with that, I stepped back into the world I had abandoned. Your room's been kept as it was, he said. Though I imagine you won't be resting long. He was right. I wasn't here to hide. That night, the heads of the 5 families gathered in the East Wing for a dinner in my honor. It was not a warm affair. It was a statement. She's back. And she's no longer just a mafia bride waiting on a broken promise. I wore black. No makeup. No jewelry. Just the faintest trace of the scars that 6 years had left behind. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. In this world, silence is louder than betrayal. Are you ready to reclaim your seat? Asked Uncle Vito, sipping from a crystal glass. I nodded. Yes. But not just my seat. I want control of the West Docks. And I want full oversight of the Eastern Circuit. There was a pause. Sharp eyes turned to my father. He gave a single nod. Granted. No more shadows. No more sidelines. I was done playing second to a man who never saw me. By morning, I was already in the field, boots muddy, hands signing contracts, voice commanding respect. The docs bowed to me once again. And the whispers began. The mafia princess is back. And this time, she's not smiling. Back in Valemont, Daniel noticed. It started with missed calls. Then texts. Are you safe? Why didn't you tell me you were leaving? Alessa, this isn't like you. By the third day, he sent someone to check my apartment. Of course, I was gone. All that remained was the empty closet and the lingering scent of betrayal. Then came the message I had been waiting for. I miss you. I read it once. Deleted it. I didn't miss him. I missed who he pretended to be. Weeks passed. Wexley thrived. My circuits grew faster and cleaner. I restructured the finances, rooted out 2 corrupt captains, and doubled profits in less than a month. At night, I stood by the window, watching the stars. I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I planned. Until one night, I received a gift. A small velvet box. No sender. Inside was a pair of diamond earrings, ones I had once admired at a gala. A note beneath them read, I remember. I set the box down. And smiled. Because it was working. Daniel never chased anyone. He commanded. But now, he was unraveling. Because I had finally done the one thing he never expected. I left first. 2 days later, a man arrived at the compound. Alone. No weapons. Just a sealed envelope. For Alessa, he said, bowing. I opened it. Inside was an invitation. Handwritten. With Daniel's signature at the bottom. Dinner. No guards. No excuses. Just us. I showed it to my father. He frowned. It could be a trap. I know, I replied. But I want him to think I'm still reachable. Are you? I looked him in the eye. No. Still, I accepted. I arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes late. Daniel was already there, alone, true to his word. He stood when he saw me, his eyes scanning my face as if looking for a familiar detail that no longer existed. You cut your hair, he said. Yes. It looks good. I didn't respond. We sat. The table was set for 2. Candles flickered between us. A string quartet played in the background. He had reserved the entire place. You disappeared. You let me. He sighed. I didn't know it had gotten that bad. It wasn't just Emily. I know. He leaned forward. 6 years, Alessa. We built everything together. You can't walk away from that. I didn't walk. I ran. And for good reason. I made mistakes. You made choices. Over and over again. He looked down. For the first time, he had no words. I took a sip of water. Why did you call me here? He hesitated. Because I still love you. I let that sink in. Then I stood. You love having someone who never says no. Who waits. Who sacrifices. But that woman is gone. And in her place stands someone who finally understands her worth. I placed a small silver coin on the table. The crest of the Wexley Syndicate. I'm not coming back to you, Daniel. I'm taking back everything you thought I gave up. And I'm starting with the Eastern ports. His eyes widened. Those are mine. Not anymore. He stood too. His voice dropped low. This is war. I smiled coldly. No, Daniel. This is closure. And I walked away. As I exited the restaurant, the night air wrapped around me like armor. In the distance, I could hear the faint sound of waves crashing. Valemont had just lost its queen. And Wexley had reclaimed its heir. I never looked back. Not even when I heard him call my name. Because this time I wasn't waiting. I was building an empire. without him. 2 weeks after our final confrontation in Valemont, the first strike came. A shipment of pharmaceuticals headed for the eastern ports vanished mid-transit. No gunfire, no trace, just silence. It was too clean to be a random theft. It was a message. Daniel had decided to fight. Good. Because I was done flinching. That morning, I called an emergency meeting at the Wexley compound. The room filled quickly, captains, enforcers, advisors, old allies, new eyes. I stood at the head of the table. Calm. Controlled. Deadly. We lost a shipment last night, I said. It was rerouted by someone with high-level access. Valemont, someone muttered. I nodded. This is not a guessing game. It was Daniel. He wants to test our response. The room went tense. Some looked uneasy. Daniel still had influence, still inspired fear. He trained you, said Arturo, an old loyalist. He knows your moves. He trained a version of me that no longer exists, I replied. And they believed me. Because I had changed. After the meeting, I went to the vault room and opened a drawer marked with a single name. Project Knox. Inside were documents, blueprints, surveillance logs, plans I had started long ago. Back when I first noticed Daniel's divided loyalty. I had never used them. Not until now. I spread the files across the marble table and began to move the pieces. Daniel thought he was facing the woman who once waited for him on docks and in Candlelit Suites. But he was wrong. He was facing the daughter of a Don who had taught her how to lead armies without lifting a single weapon. Over the next 5 days, I locked down the Eastern Circuit. I replaced the security system at all major ports. I reassigned personnel. Every guard who had ever taken a bribe was fired. Every route was randomized. Then, I made my move. A routine delivery to Valemont Harbor was altered, 2 hours late, different container numbers, rerouted personnel. I knew Daniel would notice. And he did. When the decoy shipment arrived, his men hijacked it as expected. But instead of pharmaceuticals, the crates held concrete blocks and GPS trackers. The moment the shipment crossed the Valemont city line, I pressed a button on my phone. Dozens of texts were triggered. To police contacts, reporters, rival crews. I signed them anonymously, of course. But the fallout hit like thunder. News spread that Daniel's crew had been caught stealing worthless cargo. Videos leaked showing his men scrambling to unload blocks while sirens wailed in the background. It wasn't about the money. It was about the humiliation. The next day, he called me. You want a war, Alessa? You got one. Click. I didn't flinch. Instead, I hosted a gala. To the outside world, it was a celebration of Wexley's legacy. To insiders, it was a show of power. I wore a fitted black suit and walked through the ballroom with my head high. People watched me with awe. The girl who had once stood in a man's shadow was now the storm he couldn't contain. A man approached with a glass of wine. Miss Alessa, congratulations. The docks have never run so smooth. Thank you. He smiled. Some say you're provoking Daniel too much. That you should have left quietly. I sipped the wine and replied, if I had left quietly, I wouldn't be here to toast my victory. That night, under the crystal chandeliers, I felt no remorse. Because I had given Daniel everything. And he had turned me into this. A week later, I got another surprise. A package arrived. No return address. Inside was a red velvet box. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a bullet. Engraved with the word, loyalty. There was no note. There didn't need to be. It was his way of saying I had broken something sacred. I didn't deny it. Because loyalty given blindly is not loyalty, it is slavery. And I had freed myself. But I knew what came next. He wouldn't just attack my business. He'd come after people. And I had to be ready. So I visited the woman I had once ignored for years. Elena. My cousin. We had grown up together, trained together, but she had always been second to me. Overshadowed. I had left her behind when I followed Daniel to Valemont. But now, I needed her. She opened the door in a plain blouse, holding a wrench. Alessa. I came to apologize. She blinked. For which part? The years of silence or the fact that you only show up when you need something? Both. She leaned against the doorframe, then stepped aside. Come in. We sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by blueprints and scattered tools. I need someone I trust, I said. Someone who remembers who I was before all this. And now that you burned Valemont to the ground, you want me to stand next to you? I want you to stand with me before the fire spreads here. She studied my face for a long moment. Then nodded. I'm in. We spent the next 3 nights assembling a team. All women. All overlooked by the old guard. Sharp. Silent. Lethal. We called them the Vow. Each had a story. A betrayal. A scar. And each had sworn never to be underestimated again. With them, I reclaimed 3 warehouses Daniel's men had secretly controlled. I cut off his surveillance systems. I exposed his accountant for laundering funds through shell charities. And every time I made a move, I left behind a single calling card. 6 years. 99 weddings. No bride. He understood what it meant. It was personal now. One night, I received another call. This time, it was from my mother. Your father wants to speak to you. I entered his study an hour later. He stood by the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. You are becoming a force, he said. But you are also becoming a target. I know. You should end this. Before it turns into something you can't walk away from. I don't plan to walk away. He turned. You love him. I loved who he pretended to be. And what if there's still a part of him that's real? Then he should have shown it before I became a weapon. There was a long silence. Then he said quietly, finish it cleanly, Alessa. Do not become what you were trying to destroy. I didn't answer. Because part of me already knew it was too late. Daniel had crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. And I had built a machine that wouldn't stop until it ran out of fuel, or enemies. 3 days later, I received word that Emily Jennings had left the country. Why? I asked. The informant shrugged. No one knows. Some say she cracked under pressure. Others say Daniel sent her away for her safety. I didn't believe either. Emily had always been a strategist. If she left, it was because she saw what was coming. And what was coming was something neither she nor Daniel could stop. Because I had already written the final chapter. And in it, I didn't need to become a bride. I needed to become a legend. I received the photo at 3 in the morning. No text. No caption. Just the image. Daniel, standing outside the Wexley courthouse, in full daylight, his hands in his pockets. Unbothered. Confident. A half smile on his face like he owned the world. Beneath the photo, scribbled in ink. Come home. We were better together. I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned off my phone. But the next day, he made his message louder. 3 of my lieutenants were arrested during a routine inspection at the Eastern Docks. The police found planted evidence, enough to keep them locked away for months. I had seen that trick before. Daniel had taught it to me. He was getting bold. Which meant he was getting desperate. Later that afternoon, Elena barged into my office. She held a tablet in her hand. He made a public statement, she said. Look at this. She played the video. Daniel stood behind a podium, surrounded by false charity banners and flashing cameras. His voice was calm. Rehearsed. I've always believed in second chances. In forgiveness. Some people build walls. Others build bridges. I choose to build. He looked directly into the camera. And to the one person who taught me what loyalty meant, I hope you'll come back. There's still time to stop this war before it burns everything we built. He had polished the story. Made himself look noble. Regretful. As if I were the one destroying the peace. As if I had started this. I almost admired the performance. Almost. Elena narrowed her eyes. He's spinning it. Making you the villain. Let him, I said. The real move's already in place. That night, I met with the logistics team. We traced every one of Daniel's shipments through Vailmont's underground route. For years, he had run weapons through a flower import business. It was brilliant, until now. We intercepted one truck, then another. We rerouted them. Took the cargo. Sent the drivers back unharmed but shaken. I wanted Daniel to know I could have ended them, but chose not to. He needed to understand. Mercy is not the same as weakness. 3 days later, he responded. I came home to find my apartment ransacked. Not the Wexley estate. My old one in Vailmont, the one I hadn't returned to in weeks. I had left a single thing behind. A small notebook. Full of poems I had written when I first fell in love with him. He burned it. The ashes were scattered on my bed. And on the wall, written in spray paint, were the words. Queen of Nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I sat down in the ruins and wrote my final move. I called a meeting of all Eastern Syndicate heads. They arrived that evening, each with their own guards, each curious and cautious. We gathered in the long hall, once used for coronation dinners. This time, it was war. I propose a merger, I announced. A new alliance. No more titles. No more thrones. One syndicate, built by all of us, led by vote, not blood. There was a long silence. Then a gruff voice from the back spoke. And who proposed this? You? I nodded. Yes. Because you want Daniel gone? No, I said calmly. Because I want the game to change. They listened. Because they were tired too. Tired of Daniel's greed, of my father's era, of being pawns in a war built on emotion. By the end of the meeting, 12 syndicates had signed. The Eastern Seaboard now answered to a council. Not to Daniel. Not to me. That night, I walked alone to the cliffs overlooking Vailmont Bay. The sea was dark. The stars overhead flickered like ghosts of old dreams. Daniel had once brought me here, on our first anniversary. We drank wine and kissed under the moonlight, promising never to betray one another. What a lie that had turned out to be. I closed my eyes. And I let it go. The love. The hope. The pieces of me still tied to that memory. Then I turned and left the past behind. Back in the city, Daniel was unraveling. His accountant fled to Greece. 2 of his captains defected. Emily was still gone, and rumors claimed she was selling secrets to the highest bidder. He stopped showing up to meetings. Stopped smiling. Stopped pretending. And then, he sent one final message. A dinner invitation. Not a trap. A peace offering. The card read. One last supper. No guards. No lies. Just you and me. Elena said it was foolish. My father said it was suicide. But I went anyway. Because I needed to see what remained. The place was familiar. A rooftop restaurant where he had once promised me the world over tiramisu and red wine. It hadn't changed. But we had. Daniel sat alone, nursing a glass of something amber. When he saw me, he stood. His face was thinner. His eyes hollow. You came. I wanted to see who you are now. He pulled out a chair. I sat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, I miss her. Who? You. Before all this. I tilted my head. The girl who forgave you 99 times? He looked down. Do you think I ever loved you? He asked quietly. No. His gaze snapped up. I know you didn't. Not the way I needed. He swallowed hard. I tried. I thought I did. I leaned forward. You loved the idea of me. The loyalty. The silence. The woman who bent so you wouldn't have to. He said nothing. I continued. But you never asked what I wanted. You never stopped to wonder why I stayed. And now it's too late. He nodded slowly. I thought I had more time. We always think we do. I stood. He didn't stop me. Goodbye, Daniel. He whispered, Alessa. But I was already walking away. This time, for real. No more second chances. No more dinners. No more hope. Just the sound of my heels against marble and the future stretching out before me. Back at the compound, I gathered my things. I wasn't staying in Wexley either. I had one more place to go. A coastal city in the north. Clean. Quiet. Unclaimed. No history. Just opportunity. Elena stood by my car as I loaded the last bag. You sure about this? Yes. You built an empire. I don't need an empire. I need peace. She nodded, then hugged me. When you're ready, come back. I smiled. If I'm ready. And then I drove. I didn't look back. Not when the gates closed. Not when the compound vanished behind hills. Not even when a message buzzed on my phone. From Daniel. One word. Regret. I deleted it. Because regret can't rebuild what betrayal burns. And some love stories aren't stories at all. They're warnings. The northern coast was nothing like Valemont. No roaring limousines, no murmurs of corruption in alleyways. Just salt in the air, seagulls circling above quiet piers, and storefronts that still closed by sunset. I rented a modest house at the edge of a cliff, where the wind sang through broken fences and the sea punished the rocks below like a reminder that even beauty can be violent. I didn't tell anyone my real name. To the locals, I was just Alia. A woman who paid in cash, kept to herself, and never smiled for no reason. I liked it that way. Each morning, I would walk barefoot through the cold sand before the sun rose, letting the chill bite my ankles. It reminded me that I was still alive. That I had survived. I had left behind Wexley's legacy. I had buried Daniel in silence. But the past never really dies. It just waits. It started with a letter. Slipped under my door. No return address. No postmark. Just my name written in slanted handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Alessa. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sentence. You think it's over, but you never asked who pulled the strings behind Emily. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the living room for hours, replaying every moment of those 6 years. Emily. The perfect pawn. Fragile. Needy. Loyal to Daniel, or so I thought. But the letter changed everything. What if Emily hadn't been acting alone? What if someone had wanted to keep me distracted, humiliated, sidelined? I pulled out my old phone, the one I swore I'd never use again. It had no signal, but the files were still there. Photos. Notes. Call logs. I opened a folder marked archive and stared at a timeline of all 99 weddings. All 99 cancellations. The pattern was too clean. Emily's injuries always came within 48 hours of a major deal. Her crises always coincided with decisions where I had more leverage than Daniel. Every time I was about to rise, she fell. And Daniel ran. Was he stupid, or was he being manipulated, too? The next morning, I took a train. 8 hours south. Back to Valemont. The city hadn't changed, but I had. I didn't go to Daniel. I went to the only person who might know the truth. Simon Carr. Daniel's former legal strategist. The man who handled every backroom agreement, every property transfer, every offshore account. He lived in a glass tower downtown, guarded by cameras and silence. I waited outside his building until he left for lunch, then slipped in behind a courier. Inside his office, the air smelled like ink and fear. He looked up from his desk, startled. Alessa? Close the door. He did. His hands trembled slightly. I heard you disappeared. I did. But you left a thread untied. Emily. His face shifted. She's gone. Not the question. Who was backing her? He swallowed hard. I can't say. You can, I said calmly, or I'll make sure your name ends up on the next federal leak. He hesitated. Then opened a drawer, pulled out a flash drive, and set it on the table. I didn't know how deep it went. I just handled the paperwork. But she wasn't just playing Daniel. She was getting paid. Quarterly. By someone else. Who? Valemont Holdings. I froze. That's Daniel's front. He shook his head. Used to be. 3 years ago, he was quietly pushed out. The shares were sold. Silent investors. Shadow boards. Someone wanted control without visibility. And Emily? Was their plant. I took the flash drive and left without another word. Back at a rundown motel outside the city, I plugged it into my laptop. Documents. Transfers. Meeting logs. One name kept showing up. Lucien Graves. A quiet financier. Known for funding political campaigns, art galleries, and private militias. He wasn't a mafia man. He was something worse. A collector of power. And now I understood. Emily was never Daniel's assistant. She was Lucien's asset. Her job was to keep Daniel chasing chaos while Lucien took control from underneath. And me? I was just collateral. A woman with too much influence. Too much heart. He turned us against each other while he built an empire in the dark. I stared at the screen for hours. Then I made a decision. I wasn't going to bring the story to the press. I wasn't going to cry, or run, or ask for help. I was going to bury Lucien Graves. Brick by brick. Word by word. And I was going to start by visiting the last person who still had enough rage to light the match with me. Daniel. It was past midnight when I reached his compound. Half the lights were off. The guards barely glanced at me. Inside, he was sitting alone in the den, shirt half-buttoned, whiskey in his hand, eyes lost in something I couldn't see. He looked up as I entered. You came back. Don't get used to it. He gestured to the chair across from him. Want a drink? No. He poured anyway. Then I said it. Lucien Graves. He stilled. The name pierced something in him. You know? I know everything now. He looked down at the glass, then tossed it across the room. It shattered against the fireplace. He used us both. No. He used you. He underestimated me. He laughed bitterly. I underestimated you. Silence. I pulled out the flash drive. Here's proof. Wire transfers. Meeting logs. Emily's real payroll. He took it, barely blinking. I'll kill him. No. You won't. His head jerked up. Because I will. He studied me. You're not the same woman I left waiting on the yacht. No, I said softly. She died when you boarded that helicopter without looking back. He didn't apologize. I didn't ask him to. Instead, I stood. I need your help. One time. One night. He nodded. Deal. We met the next evening at a warehouse near the old tracks. Daniel brought a small team, quiet, loyal. I brought Elena and two of the vow. Lucien was attending a gallery showcase. One of his vanity projects. We didn't bring guns. We brought the truth. Projected across the gallery walls. Every document. Every deal. Every betrayal. While guests sipped champagne and complimented the lighting, emails began scrolling across the ceiling. Lucien turned pale. Security surrounded him. But it was too late. The board of directors had seen enough. His investors too. By midnight, Lucien Graves had lost everything. And by morning, he vanished. No one knows where he went. Some say he fled to Europe. Some say Daniel found him. I never asked. I didn't care. Because justice doesn't always come with a trial. Sometimes it comes with silence. And a woman you thought you broke standing tall where you expected ashes. Daniel never tried to kiss me. Never tried to apologize. But as I left the warehouse that night, he said, "I should have followed you. The night you cut the dress." I turned back. "You should have loved me. Before I learned how to love myself more." Then I walked away. Again. This time, not out of pain. But power. Because I had finally burned the right bridges. And I didn't need to go back. I disappeared again. Not in fear. In peace. After the fall of Lucien Graves, the city buzzed with rumors. Some said he had been executed by a rival syndicate. Others believed he fled to a private island with a new identity. I knew the truth lay somewhere in between, and I had no interest in finding out. He had served his purpose. He reminded me that love without power is a prison. And power without purpose is poison. The day after the expose, I returned to the north. To the house by the cliff. To the silence I had earned. I deleted all old files. Every image of Daniel. Every voice memo I had ever saved during our 6 years together. And when I was done, I lit a small fire in the fireplace and watched the digital ghosts turn to ash on the screen. It didn't hurt. Not like it used to. Elena visited a week later. She brought wine, fresh bread, and news. "The Eastern Syndicate is thriving without centralized power," she said, kicking off her boots. "Your council idea worked. No blood spilled in 35 days. That's a record." I nodded. "Good. You could come back." "I don't want to come back." She studied me quietly. "You say that like you mean it now." "I do." "Because of Daniel?" "No. Because of me." She didn't press further. Instead, we sat on the porch and watched the sea crash against the rocks. Somewhere between the second glass and the quiet hour before dawn, she asked the question I had buried deep. "Did you ever really love him?" I thought for a long moment. Then answered truthfully. "I loved who I thought he was. I loved the idea that someone could see all of me and still choose to stay. I loved the fairy tale I built in my head more than the man who stood in front of me." Elena leaned back. "We all do that at least once." "And what about you?" "I loved someone once. He chose someone else. I didn't burn down cities for him, though." I smiled faintly. "Your self-control is impressive." We didn't talk about it again. The next morning, she left. And I returned to my quiet routine. It was almost a month later when I saw him again. Daniel. Standing at the edge of the cliff behind my house like a ghost. He wore black. No guards. No arrogance. Just exhaustion and something like sincerity. I didn't call out to him. I let him stand there. After a while, he turned and saw me leaning against the doorframe. "You found me." He nodded. "I heard you were here." Took me a while to believe it. "I'm not hiding." "I know." We stared at each other across the distance. Then he asked, "Do you want me to leave?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "That depends on why you came." He walked slowly toward me, stopping at the porch steps. "I wanted to see what you became. You could have just watched the news. I needed to see it for myself." We stood in silence again. The kind of silence that used to feel heavy between us. Now, it just was. He sat on the steps. I didn't invite him inside. He didn't ask. "Everything's changed," he said quietly. "I know. I don't run the ports. I don't run anything anymore." "Was that your choice?" "No. But maybe it should have been." He looked up at me. "You're not angry anymore." "No. Not even a little?" "I think I exhausted every kind of anger a person can carry. All I have left is clarity." He nodded. "You became what we used to pretend you already were." I stopped pretending. We were quiet again. Then he asked, "Do you still love me?" That question should have stung. It didn't. I sat across from him. "No," I said honestly. "I loved the idea of being chosen. You made me believe that love required sacrifice. That waiting made me strong. But it didn't. It made me small. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. I know." He ran a hand through his hair, eyes tired. "I tried to replace you with Emily. I thought if I could protect someone else, maybe I'd be worth something. And now? Now I know I was never protecting anyone. I was hiding." We sat in silence for several minutes, the waves crashing behind us like background music to a scene neither of us knew how to finish. Finally, I stood. "You're not the villain in my story anymore, Daniel." He looked up. "But you're not the ending either." He didn't argue. Instead, he smiled faintly. A sad, grateful smile. "Can I ask one more thing?" "Yes." "Did you ever imagine a future with me that ended differently?" I nodded. "Yes. I used to dream of waking up next to you, coffee on the nightstand, wedding ring on my hand, and peace in my heart. And now? Now I wake up alone. And I still have peace." He stood. "I won't come back again." "You don't have to." He walked toward his car. Stopped halfway. Then turned and said, "You were always stronger than I deserved." And then he left. No dramatic gestures. No promises. Just a man who had finally stopped pretending. That night, I stood on the cliff and let the wind whip through my hair. There were no tears. No regrets. Only one truth that lingered in the sea air. Closure isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives in a quiet conversation on wooden steps, beneath a gray sky, with no audience and no witnesses. And sometimes, that's enough. In the days that followed, I began writing again. Not poetry. Not love letters. Stories. Of women who walked away. Of women who burned bridges and built empires from ash. Of loyalty reclaimed. Of silence broken. Each morning, I wrote with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. And slowly, people began to find me. A neighbor who brought fresh tomatoes in exchange for conversation. A teenage girl who wanted help with an essay about power and gender. A retired fisherman who asked if I would help manage his accounts. They didn't know who I used to be. They only saw who I was now. And that, finally, was enough. One evening, as the sky burned orange over the water, Elena called. "You know, the council left your chair open. I don't want it. You earned it. I earned the right to choose." She laughed. "Fair. Want to come visit next month?" "Maybe." Daniel's gone. Moved to the mountains. No one's seen him since. "Good. You okay, Alessa?" I looked out at the sea. "Better than okay." "Then I'll let you go." Click. I sat back, the breeze brushing against my skin. This wasn't a fairy tale. This wasn't a revenge story. This was a rebirth. And for the first time in 6 years, I didn't want anything from the past. Not apologies. Not justice. Not even acknowledgement. I just wanted tomorrow. And it was finally mine. Spring arrived quietly. The waves softened. The skies turned pale blue. Wildflowers crept across the cliffs like nature's slow applause. It had been 4 months since I had last seen Daniel. 2 since I heard Elena's voice. And exactly 6 weeks since I opened my laptop and submitted the final draft of my manuscript. Title, 99 Dresses and a War. It wasn't fiction. But I never said it was memoir either. I changed the names. I left out the blood. I focused on the heartbreak and the slow unraveling of a woman who waited at the edge of love until there was nothing left to wait for. I didn't expect it to be accepted. But the email arrived on a Thursday. "We would be honored to publish your work." No one knew who I was. They only knew the voice on the page. That was enough. And maybe that was the point. To be seen for who I had become, not what I had survived. I printed out the contract, signed it, and placed it in the outgoing mail bin at the local post office. The clerk smiled. Congratulations, Alia. It was the first time I didn't flinch at the name. I walked home, barefoot, the cold ground anchoring me. By the time I reached my porch, a car was waiting. Not black. Not armored. Just a simple silver sedan. Inside sat a woman I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Emily Jennings. Older now. Thinner. Her hair shorter. She stepped out, hands raised slightly, as if approaching a wild animal. I thought you'd shoot me, she said. You're not worth a bullet. She smirked. That's fair. I didn't invite her in. We stood at the porch edge, the wind pulling at our jackets. What do you want? Not forgiveness. Good. You wouldn't get it. I came to explain. You came to relieve your conscience. Let's not pretend this is for me. She looked away. You were always smarter than me. No. I just never underestimated myself the way you hoped I would. Emily nodded slowly. You were supposed to be a shadow. Loyal. Silent. Easy to move out of the way. You never understood what loyalty costs. I do now. Do you regret it? She hesitated. Yes. But not because I lost. Because I hurt someone who never deserved to be played. I folded my arms. So why now? Why come here after all this time? She dug into her coat pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in velvet. I kept this. I opened it slowly. Inside was a thin silver ring. Simple. Unpolished. A small engraving inside. To my future bride. D. I stole it, she said. He had it made for your 100th wedding attempt. I stared at the ring for a long moment. Then placed it on the porch railing and stepped back. Leave it. And go. Emily's eyes didn't hold defiance anymore. Only guilt. She left without another word. When the car disappeared down the road, I stood for a moment, staring at the ring. Then I picked it up. And threw it off the cliff. I never watched to see where it landed. Because I no longer needed to know. The next day, my book went to print. It sold 2,000 copies in the first week. 10,000 by the third. Book clubs called. Podcasts emailed. Women wrote letters. You told my story. I thought I was the only one who waited. I finally walked away, too. I cried reading the letters. Not because I was sad. But because I realized that my silence had never been power. My voice was. One day, I received a package from an address in the mountains. No name. No note. Inside was a worn photograph. Daniel and me. Laughing on the rooftop restaurant during the early days. Before the lies. Before Emily. Before the wait. On the back, he had written 4 words. I remember us laughing. I burned the photo. Not in hate. In peace. Because the woman in that image was gone. And the woman I had become didn't need proof that it had once been good. She needed freedom. And I had it. A year later, my book became a stage play. I sat in the back row on opening night, anonymous, heart pounding as the curtain rose. The audience gasped. Cried. Cheered. And when the actress playing me stood at the edge of the stage, in a torn white dress, scissors in hand, and whispered, "This is where it ends, just like this dress." I smiled. They stood. They clapped. But I didn't bow. Because the applause wasn't for me. It was for every woman who had waited too long. For every woman who had cut herself free. I walked home under the stars. The theater faded behind me. The wind felt warm. And for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking of Daniel. Or Emily. Or betrayal. I was thinking of morning. Of the smell of salt and coffee. Of pages unwritten and stories untold. Of what comes after survival. Because this story didn't end in marriage. It didn't end in revenge. It ended in reclamation. And I would write the next chapter, not as a woman who had been broken, but as one who finally knew she never needed to be chosen to matter.